Hi folks, my name is Brad Allen, I'm Director of the Library. I want to thank you for being here for our kickoff of our Civic Engagement 101 series. We have a lot of partners, one of which is Kansas Public Radio and the League of Women Voters and the NAACP. So folks are aware we are filming this tonight and it'll be available on our YouTube page in a few days once we get that all edited. With this Civic Engagement series, we aim to empower community members with information that they need to make the best choices for themselves. We're honored to have 4 expert panelists here this evening. We're here to talk about misinformation and disinformation in the media. So in the interest of time, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves before the first question, and we'll hold about 20 minutes for audience questions at the end of the program. I'll turn it over to Sean.
I'm Sherman Smith. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Kansas Reflector. Listeners of the mic. I'm Sherman Smith. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Kansas Reflector. We're a nonprofit state news outlet. Our stories are free to read. We do this as a public service and for the public good. Before that, I was at the Media Capital Journal for 16 years. I'm a Florida State University graduate and grew up in the rural part of Lyon County.
Hi, my name is Jerry Beers, and I'm a lecturer at the University of Kansas School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Before, I came here in 2016. Before I started teaching full-time, I spent 30 plus years as a reporter and mostly as a copy editor at community newspapers in the Midwest. And one thing I do I've done related to this is I belong to the American Copy Editor Society, and for that organization and for the Pointer Media Studies Institute, I've authored online training sessions on visual verification, like how do you know whether images are real or fake, whether they've been tampered with. So that relates to this event.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Han Jin Seo, professor and associate dean for research and faculty development in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Kansas. Before joining academia, I worked as a reporter for Southern newspaper for 7 years, covering politics and diplomatic affairs. And as part of my research program, I have worked with marginalized community members in Kansas and Missouri regarding their media literacy and information literacy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patricia Weeks-Gaston. I'm not used to this. I usually do this talking class. But I'm Patricia Weeks-Gaston. I am the Lacey Haynes Professor at the University, at the William Allen White School of Journalism at the University of Kansas. I'm a 1981 graduate of the school. I spent nearly 40 years in newspapers, won a Pulitzer for international reporting at the Dallas News in 1994-95, and then finished my career as an editor of Washington Post. And I came back to Kansas about 6 years ago.
Sorry. Turn the volume up a little bit. Can folks hear a little bit better because the noise has been okay? Thank you. I did also want to mention too, I did want to mention that if you have a hearing aid, we do have a hearing loop here. You can set your hearing aid to T. That's why we use the microphones. When we have robust, loud voices, that helps folks who have hearing aids to be able to hear too. And so they're a little bit directional mics, so if you're getting a little bit closer, we'll all work through this. Thanks, sir. The first question that I have for you all tonight is who is behind the spread of information and what is the motivation to disseminate this information?
Well, let me start out by saying it's really hard to answer who because it's so many different groups. I don't think there's just one group or one affiliated with one person who is responsible for this information. And so I think that for any of you to think, well, it's just one side or it's just one group, that's wrong. But I think it's anyone who wants to unfairly sway people to their side and maybe a lot of those people don't have the credibility to sway without misinformation.
Anybody who has something to gain, right? Money and power usually.
Yeah, and also I want to mention, sometimes people share information, false information, without realizing that is inaccurate or false. So we call it, inaccurate information or false information shared without intent to mislead with misinformation. Disinformation, you share such information with intent to mislead. So, as Darren mentioned, really a variety of actors in society, knowingly or unknowingly, share misinformation. But maybe we can kind of use an example, recent example of false claim about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, stealing eating, pets. So that was, according to media reports, someone posted on a Facebook group, and people started sharing a screenshot of that Facebook post via social media sites that was now getting attention in the mainstream media and then mentioned by politicians, including former President Donald Trump. So that's a lot of the spread of misinformation ecosystem these days. So the social media amplified through a variety of media types, and and then now we have AI, which makes it even faster to spread misinformation. So it's human actors, now AI and other computational methods that is contributing to the spread of misinformation.
And also last week, I believe it was last week, the government announced that they were charging some folks with some of the cyber crime. And so we're seeing that it could be the Persians, it could be Chinese, it could be whoever. But we're seeing and hearing more about that. If you all recall the 2020 election, Chris Krebs, who was working for the Trump administration, said that this was like the most, this was the safest election, that there was no tomfoolery and hijinks that they had found. And so here we are back at it again. And so now they have said that in the next 60 days or so, we could really expect to see quite a bit more action, whether it's bots on Twitter and X, just everywhere, Facebook, what have you.
I wanted to comment on something Hunjin said about AI becoming part of this. When you realize that there are no information police on the web, right? Anybody can post anything now. There are some police, there are some policing efforts. Things get knocked off, or there are laws about child pornography and things like that. But there's this wide bowl of things that people can put in, and they don't really have to show any proof. And then we have AI, which, AI has a lot of different parts, but a part you all hear about a lot when you think about ChatGPT or something like that is what's called a large language model. So to the computers that are running AI, all of that information on the web gets fed in, and then AI uses predictive methods to come up with an answer for you. Well, if AI is being fed bad information, it's only going to feed you bad information back too. So you have to remember that the misinformation out there kind of keeps circling around and around and around and around, and it gains its own speed, like the cats and the dogs, it just keeps doubling on itself.
This next question kind of continues this part of the conversation, about these evolving technologies and artificial intelligence. How is that changing people's perception of video photos as reliable information source? What are ways that people can try to vet these kinds of things or tell the difference from something that is real, something that is not real, something that's verifiable? You know, what? Talk about it a little bit, but you know, how has this changed how people are accessing and trying to determine what's valid?
I think people are starting to get more and more skeptical or scrutinize some of what they're seeing on social media, but the technology is moving so fast that we're not far away from not being able to discern at all the quality of an image or a video or anything else. Hopefully we're a little bit further away from generating a news story with AI that people can tell the difference on, but even then we have major media corporations that are using AI to generate some of their stories. And just hope that people don't care enough to about the difference. So I think it's a challenge that we have, primarily with where we go, kind of related to the last question, to get our information, and just whether our instinct is to trust what we see on our phone in front of us. I think we have to push back against that.
Generally, there's a feeling among experts right now that we're really very close to AI images in particular, but video, to not being detectable. You know, there are things you can look at right now, like those of you who might have seen a photo online of Katy Perry at the Met Gala in a gown. Katy Perry posted on her Instagram right away, I wasn't at the Met Gala, this wasn't me, right? And her mother had commented on the photo, oh, Katie, you look so good, I didn't know you had that gown. But you could kind of look at that picture, and you could look at the people in the background, all these photographers, and you could look at things like their fingers, and you could see like, they would have 6 fingers or 4 fingers, or their fingers were excessively long, or they had big spaces in it. And right now, in photos and videos, those kind of problems still exist, so you can still detect it. But experts think we're probably only a year or 2 away from things that are undetectable, so then how do you know? And you know that comes up in politics because I think we all know that Donald Trump posted on his History Social a photo of Taylor Swift, you know, with the Trump, and then if you looked at her social media yesterday, she endorsed Harris. So, you know, I'm not trying to be political about who can do it, because any side can do it, and probably any side will do it, but you kind of have to look at those kind of things, and you have to say to yourself, does that seem like that would really be the case? And I think people are going to look at things, video and photo, and they're going to be way less trustful. Even things that are real, they're gonna say, how do I know? How do I know that's real?
I agree that there's a lot of, I hope that we, citizens have a skepticism and critical assessment of videos and images as well as audios, because now the audio cloning has become a lot easier. So how do we check, in terms of the AI-based, there are a lot of AI-based misinformation detection tools. We have a lot of advanced tools in terms of detecting misinformation, text-based misinformation. But in terms of images and audio files, the technology is a bit behind. Yesterday, I attended a session. There is an organization called Credibility Coalition. It's a coalition involving scholars, academia, and practitioner journalists, and so on, working together to develop practical means and policy with regard to misinformation and disinformation. And we had a presentation by the head of product of Factiverse. So this is one of the AI-based tools detecting misinformation. What they do is live misinformation detection. For example, during the presidential debate, they can real time show which information is completely misleading, which information is slightly misleading. They have different colors to tag that live, really very fast. How do they do that? They use a lot of different databases, including Semantic Scholar, Google Bing, and other bunch of data sources. But again, with images and audios, these are a lot difficult, and no longer maybe seeing is believing. So but I do also want to mention that in terms of the content creation, there are more guardrails regarding images, the copyright issues and so on, but we don't have much related to audio. So I think that we'll see and read more about this misleading information, or someone calling me, the voice of my mother, maybe, calling me that's not my mother, right? But I think that we'll read more about audio-based misleading information in the future.
And we have spent more, on my end, I've spent more time about words. So I haven't spent as much time about the images piece of it, although I do know that there are ways to look at the metadata on pictures, and you can tell whether or not something, when it was taken, where was it taken, et cetera, et cetera. So, but with words, one of the things we've been talking about in class, and we're just 3 weeks in, and with my writing students, is using the basic tools, your basic tools of writing. And I have my students writing with paper and pencil, because I want to see, they know about AI, we've talked about it, we just had a prompt where I asked them, is it better to be, to do the writing yourself, or would you rather have AI? And most of them said they would prefer to have themselves do it. And they talked about creativity, voice, they talked about all these different things. And so we already know that students are way ahead of us where that is concerned. So we're kind of catching up with them, but having them sit down and write for 10 minutes with paper and pencils has been a whole different world for them. And so now they're not necessarily, worried about that computer. They're sitting there and using their own tools, and knowing that sometimes you're not going to be able to use them. I mean, the world is so different now, so that's what we're trying to do on that end.
I'm wondering how many of you might know that if you were watching the Olympics and you heard Al Michaels speak, that wasn't Al Michaels, it was AI generated sentences of his voice. And he allowed it, he agreed to it, but he never said, there was a recap by Al Michaels every day. Al Michaels was sitting at home, he's retired, and that recap sounded just like standard talk, like me just sitting here and reading off something, and it was all generated by AI. So if you think about that, if they can do that with sports, how easy is it going to be to have something very realistic said by a politician or something like that that's been generated by a computer?
I guess I need to insert this question then, based on this, getting to the point where, there may really be no way of telling what, how, and this is what librarians have attempted to help people do since this profession started, is verify and vet information. What tips do you have for folks to evaluate information in news sources when you can't just take the photo at its value? What techniques could people use to feel that they're verifying and getting closer to accuracy with this kind of reality?
Yeah, I think more about the written word as well, and I just think that you have to look at a variety of sources, right? Like, don't just read Kansas Reflector, read everybody who wrote about the story. Think about, what we chose as the most important element of that story to put at the top of that story. Which quotes did we use versus other outlets? Look at a cross-section and get a better understanding of, how different outlets are approaching this, and understand which ones are more reliable. I think that's the healthiest way to approach any of this. If you're seeing something on social media that you don't know is true, where else can you verify that this exists, that it is true? I just think you need that variety of sources.
And then also with what Sherman is saying, look at stories and see if there's little tips, some little clues about transparency about their reporting process. I tell my students to tell me how you got that. Where did you go? Who did you talk to? Was that in an interview? Was that in a phone interview? Was it in an email? When did you talk to this person? Where did you get the information? And so that's a small thing, but they should have it in there. And that's how I know when they've not done what they're supposed to do. Because then I can go back to it and go, oh no, I read that such and such, and it wasn't that. So there's the transparency piece. I mean, a lot of what is happening with media is that the public doesn't feel like there's enough transparency, that they don't know where you're getting the information from. And I'm sure Jerry and I, we were in newsrooms probably about the same time. And I could remember sitting in the Post newsroom every weekend and getting phone calls from people like, where did you get that from? How did you do that? What did you do? Now, and so they would ask people. And so then we would start putting more of those things in the pieces. People also are very untrustworthy about opinions in stories. So sometimes when you see some of those things in there, you try to get all that. It should be just the facts. If you're doing a news story, if you're doing an opinion column, then that's what that's for. But if it's a news story, it should be full of facts, and facts that can be verified. Also, I also have students put links into things. So here's the thing, if I see something and it's kind of interesting and I got a link to it, then I want you to be able to, you the reader, to be able to go to it and say, okay, well, let me go and read this for myself. The other thing I also tell them is learn and read for yourself. Don't just take everything, back in the day, you just took it at face value. Now you can't do that. So you readers have to be just as diligent as we do on this other end. And it has to be a partnership anymore. I think for a long time, it was a very top-heavy, a very patriarchal kind of thing. Okay, I'm gonna put out what I'm gonna put out, and that's the end of it. But social media, the internet, everything has changed. So you have this ability to look at all these various sources. So again, look at the story, see if it has some links in there, you can go back and look at that for yourself. That's sometimes how you'll know that, this is what they came up with. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with it, but it just means that it's there and it's for more information. So we're trying to teach students how to get more information. They don't always want to, but we're like going, please, I need to know more. So we're working on it.
In terms of, our Center for Digital Inclusion work with different groups of populations regarding information assessment. And the areas that we cover is, when you think of piece of information, and as Patricia mentioned, in the past, we had, a set of media organizations, right? Trusted media organizations, and they serve as intermediaries. And now our information consumption is very decentralized, right? So these traditional intermediaries now compete with social media influencers who are not necessarily intermediaries in the traditional sense. That will pose a lot of challenge because there is information overload. A lot of images and information right out there, right? So how do you navigate this? The areas that we cover is source credibility and content credibility. So when you're exposed to a piece of content, whether text or image, you can see who produced this, who shared this, right? That's your source. So try to assess the credibility of that source. And then do not stop there, because as I mentioned, some people unknowingly share false information, right? So you have to kind of look at the content. And in the sort of study of online information assessment, we have a set of measures, argument quality, or different measures. But really, increasingly now, it is important for organizations to really work to strengthen citizens' ability to discern misinformation, and that really requires looking at different dimensions of information.
So I'm going to give you a couple of super practical tips about if you see something, particularly an image on social media, what should you do? Like you see that, is that true? For instance, those of you who are paying attention to the news today might have noticed that there was some video of President Biden putting on a Trump hat. And that was real video. But what if you saw, it was kind of a joke thing. If you see the whole video, you get a different impression than if you see the little clips that are on social media. But let's say you saw that and you wanted to know, is that picture right? So, as a news consumer, you can use some digital tools, for instance, tineye.com, it's tineye.com, or Google image search. And you can take a screenshot of that photo or the URL of that photo and upload it to something like Tineye. And then on Tineye, you can search by when was this first posted. So you can look at that picture, you could look at X picture, and you could say, well, that just happened. This just was first posted on the web today. So now I have to do some more research, like did something like this really happen today? Or you can say, well, this post says this happened in 2016, but I see on Tineye that this photo was originally part of the Reuters collection of news from 1992, something like that. And it's very easy to use, and in fact, if you just Google how to use Tineye, it will tell you how to do it. And so there are tools available like that to you. There's a great tool called photo forensics, which is fotoforensics.com. And it's a little more complicated, but you can use it to get metadata to find out when was the photo originally, the image originally taken, and what software was used on that photo. So you can see was Photoshop used on it, or did it go through some kind of AI generator or something like that. And the thing about that you might get on there and you might say, well, I can't do this, but they have a tutorial page and it just explains to you step by step, well, how can I use that? Now, a lot of people don't think about using things like that, but those tools are all available out there for you. So at some level, you have to say, I have to be my own investigator when it comes to things I see.
Patricia, you said something that made me think about unnamed sources and the decisions that go around those. Where do you think that fits into the credibility discussion?
So in terms of those sources, you shouldn't use them unless there's a very good reason. So when I was at the Post and I was running the paper at night, or just running the newsroom, there was a handful of times when I got unnamed sources. Most of the time, because I was the editor in charge, they would tell me. And then those names would just fall into whatever in my ether. They're in there somewhere, but I couldn't even tell you who it was, or, by the end of the night I was done. But, the thing with unnamed sources is unless it's something national security, and these stories were national security based, otherwise, don't use them. And I tell the students, I want you to get somebody on the record. So, if you read Sherman's stuff, and especially with the Marion raids, et cetera, I know y'all been reading about that. They've been doing still continuing to do fabulous coverage on that, and the aftermath a year later here. No, there weren't any, I don't recall seeing any unnamed sources. When people put their names to it, they're generally not gonna be lying. Unless you just, are just nutty. But seriously, but people.
Conversely, if you're not willing to put your name to it, your opinion doesn't matter.
Right. And so you go to the next one. So I encourage the students, no unnamed sources. I have sophomores and juniors, y'all, and they want to fancy themselves as being these investigative reporters and stuff for their final project in 304. And they come in there with these unnamed, and I'm like, nope. Because if somebody is big and bad enough to tell you this stuff, then they should be able to put their names to it. And it helps the reader, which is me, to know that you really have done the work you're supposed to do. And that's kind of really where we are. So when you can read certain publications, the the Times and the Post are always gonna have those, because they're in a whole different, it's legacy press, got a whole different, that doesn't mean that they should be using them all the time. Really shouldn't. And even when there were times when I'm like, well, can we not put this person's name to it? It makes a difference. Then you're able to see, oh, okay, they're willing to put their name to this and tell me this information. Otherwise, I think it really kind of hurts us. So I think we're going back to the thing of not using as many unnamed sources. I think I read about 5 or 6, 7 publications. But generally, most publications are not really using them very much. And I think there was a period there, Sherman, I don't know if you remember, I think there was a period there where the public was like, no, we don't want it. We want to know who's telling us this information.
As they should.
Yes.
Next question I have for you is how this issue differs at a local level, at a national level, and an international level. Are there differences in approach, style?
I know during the legislative session, if I'm in the state house, I'll get lied to 10 times a day.
I should add the local, state, national, and
No, go ahead, you should say something.
Well, no, what I was gonna say is, I worked most of my career, I worked all of my career for community newspapers in smaller towns. I wasn't at the Washington Post, and I read the Washington Post all the time, but I can't really know that much individually about the people who work for the Washington Post besides what I read. But when I was a journalist in Quincy, Illinois, it's 40,000 people, I would go to the Hy-Vee and people would see me and they'd say, why did you write that headline? Or, you guys weren't fair to the Republicans at the city council meeting last night. And I wasn't even a reporter, I was an editor there, and all the reporters, people knew them around town. And I think that means on the local level, it's harder to fool people. It's harder to make that kind of thing that you see misinformation on the national level politically happen. I don't think we're gonna get to where the national media works like the local media. But I think that's the biggest difference. You're here in this town, it's easy for you to know who Sherman is, even if you've never met him, he'll come and speak to an event, and that just makes it more credible right there, because you know that person.
I think I agree with what Jerry mentioned, and so when you think about the access to information, you are local news level, you are close to the sources and events, right? Your friends and people you know are likely to have some sort of information or access. So that's one. And we have been traditionally saying that international news, I'm assuming, even though we travel internationally, but when you think of things happening in other countries, other parts of the world, you probably still rely a lot on newspapers, news media, because your access is limited compared to local news. So in that sense, your reliance on the information sources with regard to international news is greater because your access is limited. So if there is a piece of misinformation, it is kind of difficult for you to kind of assess. But the other side actually is, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of AI tools and other efforts to detect misinformation and correct information. It's based on what's available out there. The effectiveness that I mentioned, real-time misinformation detection, I said they use thousands of data sources, right, available. For local news stories, you don't have a lot of data available out there, right? So these tools are more effective, more accurate for the stories that are covered by
a lot of organizations at the national or international levels. So it's kind of interesting dynamics with regard to how misinformation is spread and kind of verified at the local, national, and international levels. Yeah.
I will say, I've been at the newsroom now nearly 7 years. And so, but I'm seeing some different things. And most of my time was spent doing foreign news and some time doing national. But one of the things that, I've had family members call and say, well, is this true? Something has happened. And I think it may have been right after the 2016 election, maybe, I think. Is this true? They send me messages, blah, blah, blah. And I know those people. I knew those people, so I knew what kind of workers they were, what kind of reporters they were. Now I don't know as many of those people. So it's hard for me to know. But so again, I look through, I read, I'm looking at a couple different pieces, I look at the LA Times, I'm looking at the Times, I'm looking at the Post, sometimes the Wall Street Journal, it just depends on how much time I have. And so I'm comparing and contrasting. But the other thing about foreign news, though, is that there's a lot of reliance on fixers, on people who live there, on people who are there, because you don't have as many, sometimes you don't have access. It's also language and some of these other things. So you're expecting somebody who lives there to really help you and to really help you with those pitfalls. Again, I've not seen anything that makes me kind of cringe. Anything that they've done. I mean, I read their stuff. I know Doug Gell, he's the editor for that section. So, and I know he sends his people pretty rigorously. In terms of the national security stuff, Peter Finn, I worked with Peter when he was in Albania and back in Kosovo. So I know that he's pretty rigorous in terms of that. But it's hard to know sometimes how rigorous other people are. Then on the flip side, the New York Times editor, he and I worked together many years ago. We worked together in Dallas. They've been really taking it on the chin lately. And I've been like, wow, what are y'all doing? So you just never know what is going on. These are big companies. That doesn't give us, that doesn't say, you can't do better. These are big places. And so sometimes you wonder, I know I do sometimes. I'm like, oh, what are you all doing? Peter Baker is a friend of mine. He covers the White House. I'm like, Peter, every now and again I might send a note. I do send notes, or I talk to other people and go, why did y'all have that headline? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Back in the day, again, on weekends when I was weekend editor, I'm telling you on phone calls I used to get. Now, I don't think they're getting nearly as many phone calls. It's harder to get people in those places. You can't get to them. And so therefore, I was hearing all kinds of stuff, people complaining. Most of the time, they weren't correct because they had one side or the other. But still, you still are hearing what the public is seeing and hearing, and that really does help you to be able to know what the public thinks. Used to do letters to the editor. Those are a whole nother world. So, but again, I would still encourage you all. If you all see something, call them up, and then if it's bothering you, then write a letter. You just never know what can get in. There's probably somebody else out in the public who feels the same way you do.
So what do you see coming in the future, and how do you see this evolving? Might there be regulations or safeguards? What it seems like this is happening fast. And put on your hat thinking into the future. What does this look like to you?
I think that it's no coincidence that this rise in misinformation and disinformation coincides with the mass decline of the number of journalists across the country. There are fewer of us who are pushing back on these things at every turn. And I think it's effectively moving the needle. I think we see more and more political figures who feel empowered to lie openly and not feel sorry about it. I think that we see fewer and fewer reporters willing to take that on. I think if you watched the debate the other nights, you might reach the conclusion that the number of lies or dishonest statements or misleading statements were 100 to 1. But the response was, how dare they fact check us 3 to 1 in the debate? And so you're already seeing them push that needle further and further to allow them to get away with more misinformation and disinformation. So I think that part of the outlook here is, are we going to continue to see a decline in the number of journalists and the number of experienced journalists working out there? Is there a way to reinvest in journalism as a society or for the public good to keep this in check? I think that has to be part of the calculation.
You know, I might be totally naive in saying this, but if you look at the history of journalism, particularly history of journalism in the United States, there have been many periods where you would, as a consumer of news, you would maybe not be able to believe what you were reading. And, you know, if you do any research on the Spanish-American War, you'll know that there were newspaper publishers in New York, like William Randolph Hearst, pushing that war and printing things that weren't true. And I think that that eventually catches up. And so then after a while, there was a big rush to reform. That's when things like the Society of Professional Journalists happened, because we've got to reform this badness in this yellow journalism, right? So I maybe naively think that eventually people are gonna step up and there's gonna be reform. But I don't know how social media plays into that, because I think that changes the landscape a little bit, because journalists can police themselves and demand integrity, but it's kind of hard to stop all of the bad actors out there and demand integrity from them.
So when I was leaving the, journalism, I was burnt out and I was looking forward to do something else, but that was the time when social media became really introduced to newsrooms, and reporters were starting to be encouraged to share stories on social media and so on. But when you look at this, I encourage students to think creatively in terms of content creation. Now, I also teach some areas in the area of strategic communication as well. There are people who don't call themselves as journalists, but who are producing quality information that is helpful in terms of, even bloggers. I have some bloggers that I really trust and have in-depth analysis of particular topics. People who podcast. I have a list of people that I trust and whose opinions as sometimes as helpful as very prominent columnists. So I encourage kind of people to think about, instead of the dichotomy of real journalists and non-journalists, but looking at the quality of source and quality of information. But in terms of looking to the future, what I think is continued efforts of maybe in two areas. One is, as we deal with misinformation, people talk about the macro level, computational methods, increasingly generative AI-related ways of detecting misinformation sources, and try to understand how you might counter the spread of misinformation. At the micro level, there are a whole lot of organizations in the US and across the world who are working to figure out what is the psychology of people sharing misinformation, knowingly sharing misinformation, and what are some measures we can introduce to really help them understand the consequences of them posting false information and being part of this misinformation ecosystem. And I know that even technology companies, we are exposed to social media company experiment almost every day. So I know that except Twitter, when it was Twitter, at some point they experimented with nudging people to think before they post. So when you type, there was a brief period that they used this. Before posting, they asked, do you really want to post this? Kind of nudging people to think before they post, right? So that's based on research, kind of understanding people's psychology, what specific measures we can take to perhaps improve people's behaviors in terms of information sharing. So I do think that the effort at the macro level and micro level will continue, but these technologies will help or not help in these efforts. Yeah.
So I would say a couple things. One is we're seeing an increase in media literacy. Children are being taught media literacy. We keep hearing about this thing about not as much civics in there, kids don't know what's happening. We do see that in the classroom. They have no idea, some of them. So media literacy is something that's really gonna have to, I think, take hold of us, because otherwise, we're just gonna be just kind of out there. The other thing is, in class today, in one of my labs today, we were talking about, we're doing the social media assignment, big one. And so we'll do it for a month, they'll do videos, and they'll do an essay. It is a writing class. But one of the students asked me, will we see a difference will news production go away? So will news gathering go away because we seem to be so much more focused on social media? And I said, well, no, it won't go away. It's the packaging. Everything keeps changing. So where Jerry said, years ago they were doing this, it's ebbing and flowing. But it is going very fast. When social media first came out, I was just like, oh my Lord, what is this? Again, we had some more eyes on us. We have all this, people looking at us and what are you doing? But there's a good thing about it, is that it has opened us up to all these other different voices. This business has been very closed to certain groups of people. One of my mentees, her name is Karen Attia, she writes to a post, and she's an adjunct at her graduate alma mater, Columbia, and she introduced me to Black Twitter. And at first when she said it, I said, huh? And she said, we're gonna go and I'm gonna teach you, we're gonna learn. And it opened up even more doors in terms of information. So yes, we are on information overload. There are some days I'm like, I can't look at another thing, I can't turn the TV on, I can't hear. But we do have access now. And so we've got the good with the bad with that. But again, with the misinformation, I don't know. I think some of that, we're gonna have to take a little bit of illness on that. And we can't just sit back and just let it just keep happening. We have to be more proactive. We have to learn a little bit like Jerry's tools and some of these other things that are out there so that we can, learn for ourselves.
One great thing that technology has done for us, as I worked for print newspapers for a lot of years and I love to print, but I have to say today, sometimes I get the print paper on my doorstep and I'm like, God, I have to throw this away again, it's just something I can do in the morning. But it's opened us up to many new sources of news. So if you look back at the Reflector, in the days before that technology was available, you couldn't have just put out your own newspaper, right? It would have been too expensive.
Not only that, but if we heard about the Marion raid in 1995, the 60,000 people who subscribed to the Capital Journal back then would have read it. But today when we wrote about it, 1 million people saw it within hours.
And so you look at Lawrence, and we have the Journal World, which is, traditional, but they're online. But we have the Lawrence Times, and we have the Reflector, and we have other media other places you can get your stories, including you could go to Canson.com, which is the university student newspaper, right? And the more voices you have, the better you're going to be able to, the better you're gonna be at detecting misinformation. Because if you hear, like if you read on Facebook, X happened, and it seems pretty big, but the Journal World isn't reporting about it, and the Times isn't reporting about it, and the Reflector isn't reporting about it, you can kind of say to yourself, well, is this really true? And that includes the national things you hear too, things you hear about the election. Well, don't just check one source, don't just go to the same source every time. Go to dozens of sources and see what they're saying, and then decide for yourself. I'm not a Swiftie, I mentioned her, thing, but I think she said one smart thing in her little endorsement, and she said, do the research yourself, and I think that's important.
Last question I have for you all, and then we'll open it up to the audience. There's signs of hope here.
Always.
Yeah.
Good, well, I was hoping that.
Always hopeful. I mean, I think I can probably speak for my panelists, my colleagues here. We got in this business because it was fun, and we liked writing, and we liked knowing things before everybody else knows them. And we're nosy, and all those things. We're curious. We just want to know. We want to learn. We're lifelong learners. We'll be reading something until we take our last breath. We are lifelong learners, and so I'm always hopeful about it. And I tell you what, sometimes, kids, they come in and they are kids, and that's what I call them sometimes. They're kids. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they can do, what they can't do. College is when you come in and learn and figure it out. Try a little bit of this and that, and when we stop doing that, then I think we're in a real hurt. But no, I'm very hopeful. I got some really talented students. I know Sherman will be knocking on my door going, hey, got somebody to come for an internship? Yes, I think I will. There's some talented kids. Jerry's got some too.
I would say though, I'm always really hopeful. I always tell my students who think, well, I won't be able to get a job in journalism. I'll say, the jobs may change slightly, but there will be jobs in journalism. I am hopeful in that respect, but I am I'm helpful with trepidation because I think, unfortunately, we're getting to the point where deepfake video is so undetectable that it will be harder and harder to figure that out. And so maybe you're gonna have to start ignoring video and start paying attention to what people write. That's why I'm hopeful.
I mentioned this to Patricia before the panel. One of the things that gives me hope is when I've had the opportunity to work with 20-somethings, somebody here actually, they're so much smarter and more talented than I was at that age. And I feel like we're in good hands with this generation.
Second one, Trevor said, professor's gonna be, optimistic about students and next generations, but I am, because when I interact with students and kind of have conversation with them and do projects with them, I can see that they care about the issues in society, and also it's not just my, anecdotal evidence. They're having some other survey, representative sample survey of showing that this younger generations, they care deeply about contributing to positive social change. And I can feel that in the classroom and in my interactions with students. So that's why I'm hopeful. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. We're gonna open it up to questions from the audience. We have Teresa's the microphone. I'm not sure if the microphone is on. We've got a microphone up here at the front. We just need folks to speak through the mic, so since we're recording this on YouTube, that some folks are gonna be able to hear. Here, let me.
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. I have a question specifically for Sherman Smith there. And I'm going to provide a couple of examples and then ask my question. And so this has to do with your publication, the Kansas Reflector. Back in December of 2023, I filed a lawsuit against USD 497. And when you reported on it, Tim Carpenter reported on it, and he said that my lawyer wrote in the complaint that the reason why I became upset and filed this lawsuit is because the school board didn't endorse my politics, my political views. So that was incorrect because we didn't state that in the lawsuit, and so I reached out, because that's not my claim. So I reached out to Carpenter and I asked him to change it to reflect reality. And so you guys reworded it to say that my lawyer said that we filed a lawsuit because the school board opposed my politics. So that doesn't reflect the reality of that situation. The reality is that it was filed on First Amendment rights violations. Politics was never even mentioned. So that's the first example I'd like you to defend, how that's not misinformation. If you're not reporting reality and I'm telling you what it is, you can go read the lawsuit and know that that wasn't said, but you still reported it. Secondly, I stood at the state capitol and with a sign that said, if you're born with a dick, you're not a chick. And you guys took a picture of me standing there, and then under the caption you said that two protesters were standing with hateful signs, my sign and my friend's sign, who said, "Make America sane again." So I'd like you to explain how that's hateful, how the truth in reality is hateful. And then secondly, here at the library, one of my friends was standing with a sign at a transgender event that said, "God didn't get it wrong. There are only two genders," and you captioned that as saying she had a transphobic sign. So I'd like you to explain how that is transphobic. And then lastly, and then I'll wrap up here, last example here, one of the papers that you're affiliated here with, Lawrence Times, and you guys mentioned it, recently published Amber Seller's statement about why she's not remaining at general public comment, and printed it word for word. And in there, one of the things that she claims is that her reason is that her and the commissioners have received threats. And so if there were threats, there would be police reports, incident reports, there'd be a case number, there would have been an arrest, and there would have been articles written about it, but none of that stuff exists. So I'd like you to defend how that's not misinformation, and frankly, journalism malpractice for the journalists not to just follow up with Amber, like, can we get the case numbers on that? That seems really serious. Our commissioners are being threatened. And then follow up with the police as well, and go, wow, so you guys arrested people for threatening the commissioner? And they never did that, they just printed it as fact. So I'd like you to defend how that's not misinformation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question, Justin. It's a lot to unpack here. The short version is I think you have a different reality than most of the rest of the people. I think I don't know what the Lawrence Times story is. They republish a lot of our stuff. I support the Lawrence Times. We're not affiliated with them. I don't answer for whatever the stories there are or how they write them. I don't know the details of a story we published 3 or 4 years ago, or what conversations you had with Tim about that lawsuit.
It was just last year.
Last year?
Yeah. I said a year ago.
I don't know the details of the story published a year ago, and what you quibbled with. I know that we were one of the few news outlets that wrote about your case, which appears to be a clear First Amendment issue, right?
You tell me.
I read the story.
Your story says it was because of my
I know
fault.
the story said a lot of things that you might quibble with. The story also said it's a First Amendment case. You filed a lawsuit. We outlined the context of that story.
So your answer is, as long as we disagree, then we are in a different reality. Got it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jack Altman. I want to thank you. I thought this was very informative. Just quickly before my question, I'm a member of the library's retroactive program for retirement people, and we had a great program this past year with Jerry. It was very informative. It's on the library's YouTube. I really suggest people look at it. She gave us a lot of stuff to look at to help. My question is, my social media is Facebook. I do a lot of political posting. I have a lot of friends, both liberal and conservative. Many of their Facebook pages are nothing but memes, attributed, but memes. Can you please speak to that and that issue as opposed to reading something from Axios or Fox or something else and having a meme, and chat a little bit about that? Thank you.
It's kind of interesting because I have a former coworker that we live in different parts of the country right now, and I keep in touch with him. I always like him, but he's completely different politically than me. And he posts memes, and he always asks me, "Why don't you respond to them?" And I'll say, because I want to have a intelligent conversation where we talk about facts, and your meme is boiling things down to like one tiny little thing that tends to misrepresent things. So Facebook is weird because you get into these, bubbles where you tend to get posts that are like you, and you maybe don't see the other side. And I try to keep friends who don't agree with me, so I can see what people are saying. But, I'm not sure I can say, I think it's not good that people rely on memes, but they certainly do. And I would never personally base my opinion of a policy or a person on just a meme, because a meme is it's like the Cliff Notes, but it's like Cliff Notes of Cliff Notes, I don't think that really answered your question, but it was a comment.
I appreciate you guys talking about the importance of doing your own research, but people are busy and lazy, and I think it can be very challenging. Most of us are not going to read 6 different newspapers a day. A lot of people just want to get the basics in 5 or 10 minutes. What happened today? And we have lawmakers, we have representatives that are supposed to be watching out for us in this situation. And it seems like something that really the government should be tackling, but I think that a lot of people that we have in Congress can't even maybe comprehend this topic. So I'm just wondering, are there any very specific things that we can encourage either state, local, national representatives, lawmakers to do in this situation? Are there bills? What's happening on a national level to help protect us from misinformation and disinformation?
I think that's tough because, as a journalist, I think that's tough to comment on, because I truly believe that freedom of speech means that I have to defend your right to say something that I don't like. But I don't think that means you should be lying. But when you start getting into legislating that kind of thing, you're going down a slippery slope, that they'll not just be legislating things that are really incorrect, that they'll be legislating things they just don't like. And so I would be a little reluctant to suggest legislation. I think it would be more important for you to vote for people who you think have your best interest at heart when it comes to misinformation. And so maybe ask your politicians about what they think about misinformation, things like that.
I want to quickly add that, people are not lazy when they say, I don't have time, I can't look at 7 publications. People are trying to be efficient, right? Given the time limit they have, right? Certainly, we don't have time. I totally agree with you, right? So, when you look at European Union, they're doing more work in terms of regulating misinformation, social media content, and so on. So there are some things that we can learn from some other countries, but what I want to highlight is grassroots efforts to address this, which kind of happens more quickly. And there are, I mentioned Credibility Coalition, they work directly with media organizations, and there is a group at Harvard Children's Science Center that sends out daily misinformation list to media organizations. These are some misinformation stories that are emerging. So watch out for this. So I see increased number of organizations doing our research, utilizing tools available, but also going beyond proactively sharing information with news organizations and whoever has the kind of ability to share information widely. So yeah.
I'd also like maybe to suggest, Google is a big company, but I'm gonna suggest something. They have something called a Google fact-checking tool. So you don't have time to read like 8 newspapers, to find it out. But if you go to the Google fact-checking tool page and you type in the claim that you're trying to check out, they will automatically sort all the publications that did fact checks on it. And then you can see, well, this was done by the Washington Post, or this was done by MSNBC, or this was done by Fox News, or whoever. And at least you can see that quick. And that's maybe quicker than you reading all 7 or 8 publications. So there are tools out there like that. So, just find out about them and use them.
I have an idea that's, I'm told is not very practical. Because I was having a conversation with First Amendment attorneys here tonight earlier this week about why lying for political gain is considered free speech, which courts say it is. I suggested that we could have a rule that says people who are seeking public office or holding public office could only say things that they would be allowed to say in a court of law. But I was told that has too many problems to be realistic.
My question is really similar. I really would like your opinion on what actions that you think the major media companies like Google and I'm blanking on the other names, but they should do to identify and remove false information.
So I used to sit next to the fact checker. That's Glenn Kessler. He works for the Post, and he is the one who came up with the 30,000 plus lies from the former president during his term. One of the things so on that website, I know that after the debate, he published, they published what things were true, what things weren't, and he grades all of them. And that is on the website, I'm sure. So you could go back in there and find certain things. It doesn't have to be something that just happened. So I think, like Jerry said, there are repositories with this stuff that you don't have to go back in and reinvent the wheel. Sitting next to Glenn and his team. So Glenn used to cover national security. He covered everything, and he kind of fell into this fact-checking thing. And he had a team of 3 or 4 folks who worked with him. And it was just all day long. They'd hear something, they'd be reading, and then they'd go and they'd check it out. So they were working with the researchers, they were doing their own reporting and everything, so that then they could go ahead and put that together. So I would suggest that you go and look at the fact checker. If you have access to the Post website, look at the fact checker. Glenn has all that stuff in there. There's probably something in there. I'm sure everything is probably there. I mean, they have looked at everything. Again, as Sherman said, the industry is contracting. It's continuing to get smaller and smaller. So there's not as many. I think maybe Glenn is probably about the only one. I think maybe Politico and some of the others maybe have some fact checkers, but for the most part, legacy media is the only one that really does. But again, that stuff is it's out there. And so just put whatever your parameters are in there. It is a very important tool, and especially during that period, because he was going through and you hear something and you go, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And then he would go right back into it and check it out and see. And 9 times out of 10, and he wasn't just doing one side. He does everybody's equal opportunity fact checker. So you'll see where he's talking about Biden. I'm sure he's been talking about Harris. He's talking about Trump. He's talking about all of them. I'm advance. So I just think, again, as I said before, I do think we have to work on this together. I like Hingen's idea about, some things being more grassroots, because you can get things done quickly, more quickly than if you're gonna try to go to Topeka and get them pretty many things, we will. Or any government entity. But I think sometimes we we're gonna have to take a little bit of this on ourselves. And yes, I read that many newspapers, but that's my reality. It's not everybody else's reality. And the other thing is, listen to radio. Go to Kansas Public Radio. I have my students do that. They take a news quiz every week. They're trying to learn things for themselves. They act like not, they don't always hear me. But I'm like, we're doing this every week. You need to learn how to be a consumer, learn how to read, learn how to hear things, know what's happening around you, because you're gonna fall for the okie doke. And that includes you all too. You're gonna fall for the okie doke if you don't even know what's really happening. So, but I always have them listen to the little Kansas Public Radio. I'm like, y'all can get about 8 or 9 stories in about 4 or 5 minutes. There's no reason for you to not listen. They have access to the New York Times. They get that for free, y'all, up there. There's no, the Reflector. They can get that too. They can get any of these things. So sometimes I think we have to take that next step and just go ahead and see what's out there, find a way to put it together, work with it, and go from there. So it's probably long.
A brief interjection, we also do have free access to New York Times through the Lawrence Library with your library card. So it's a little wonky how it works, but put in a little 72-hour code, and we have that all set up. Washington Post as well.
Okay.
I always get that confused with the Wall Street Journal.
Okay, no excuse.
But yeah, we do have some of those as well. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem, I hadn't started several minutes. But my major concern, I think, is we all agree disinformation is bad. Who's gonna decide what is disinformation? Because certainly over the last 4, if not 10 years, we've seen things, and I think probably the biggest purveyor of misinformation has ended up being the government. And they've said stuff that has turned out to be wrong, but who's got the power to then correct them? And largely the media has parroted a lot that the government has purveyed. And so that's another danger. My only other concern is I wholeheartedly agree to look at multiple sources, but look at multiple sources that are coming from different points of view. Because if you're looking at all the same, say if they're left-leaning or right-leaning, they're all saying the same thing. You say, oh, I checked 5 sources and they all said the same thing. So, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed, just kind of a little off topic, is Mark Halprin, who used to be on Morning Joe, does a daily podcast called The Morning Meeting on YouTube, and he has both Democratic consultant, Republican consultant, all sorts of people from both sides, and then everyday people from across the country that come in via Zoom and kind of give their opinion, and it's just a great opportunity to hear from people who maybe don't think like you. But that's my major concern, is if the government's peddling disinformation, who's to be there to counter that?
Well, I mean, we like to think that we're the ones who would counter them. And again, I did work for the Post and was there many times when government stuff was stopped and was lambasted. So it's not, again, it's not a perfect thing. Sometimes we get it wrong. We're human too. As journalists, we do things and think that that's the right thing at the right time. But again, there are still newspapers, websites, podcasts, and people out here who really are looking into all of these different things. And so it may not say what you might think it should say, and it may take longer than what you think it will take, but I do think that for the most part, journalism is still doing its job.
Let me give just a real quick example.
We've got
Okay.
we've got about 7 minutes, and we've got 3 other folks.
All right,
I'm sorry.
everybody knew Biden is suffering from cognitive decline. The media covered it up until he was on
The New York Times was criticized for covering that story over and over again, and it turned out to be the right story.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm in the position of, I mean, I understand all the different sources and the social media and all the crazy and insane it is. But for me, at my sort of stage in life, what I'm really struggling to understand is the power of algorithms. And when I think about it and I look at it, I'm kind of like, it's the way that we are being directed to think of certain sources as credible. And the way that when you open your computer and when you open your laptop, you don't even know that it's all these forces are made to make sure that you go to what you want to hear, or what you're most comfortable hearing, or what reinforces your worldview. And I ran out of the house tonight, I was thinking, I'm gonna bring that new book on algorithms, and I'm gonna remember my hearing aids, and neither one of them. You know, but there's a book I was just starting, and it's a University of Iowa professor on the psychology of algorithms. I don't know if that's, but I'm looking for sources that I can understand, not for coders, not for, I mean, everything's about how to use algorithms in this particular industry, or this one, but where can we go to understand how both algorithms, but also how the algorithms, how we can work against them? Is there anything we can do in terms of the way that we utilize our laptops so that we're not falling into the things, except it is more, I mean, I'd much rather be directed every morning, as I am, to the New York Times, the Washington Post, you know, and I'm not going off in other directions. But then I'm just thinking of all the people that have never read anything on the New York Times and the Washington Post. So the algorithms things for me is central.
Well, I think it's gonna be hard to completely get away from algorithms, and you're right. They do control what you see, especially if you, I'm not gonna say if you take the easy route, but if you do what most people do. So, you know, there are some things you could do, like, for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with the browser DuckDuckGo, which, you know, works like Google or Bing or anything like that. But DuckDuckGo doesn't put cookies on your computer, and so the algorithms can't work the same way on that browser. It doesn't save it. You know, maybe it's a little hard for you because it doesn't save the histories. I mean, I want to use Google because it's got all my passwords in it, and I can get to my bank really easy and stuff. But maybe if I'm looking at something news, I'd use DuckDuckGo because it is a privacy-based browser. But you know, all that takes some work on your part too. And if you know anything about the algorithms, what you know is that the people who write them want to keep them totally secret. Google will not reveal various things about its algorithms. Experts get in there and see how they work and guess, but it's very secret. And my sister-in-law's brother works for Google, and I can tell you he's signed many contracts that are gonna, like, practically kill him if he lets information out about the algorithms, right? So, but there are a few things you can do, and that would be one.
Yeah, and in addition to what Darren mentioned, so, you know, you have seen in the past couple of years, you are increasingly asked about the cookie setting, right? You can reject most of them unless they are essential for you to review their content, but also there's incognito mode on the web browser if you don't want to leave the trail too much. Also, I think it is important to understand how algorithm works, right? There are a lot of good books on bias in algorithm because the algorithm is developed based on the majority mainstream people search behavior, right? So there's a good book called Algorithmic Bias. The name of the author escapes me, but I strongly encourage you to kind of look at the books that talks about how they work and what are the problems in the existing algorithms, because they are relying primarily on so-called mainstream users' information-seeking behavior.
Just a quick comment on the algorithms. I'm surprised that nobody mentioned being intentional about disposing your bias and going intentionally to sites that you disagree with. That's what I do. I don't get a algorithm controlled feed because I get sources from everywhere. And I'm intentional about going to those sources, and that's one way to beat the algorithm, is to be intentional about going to sources that you disagree with. But my main thing that I wanted to come up and ask you guys all about was, you talked about it's generally misinformation, but you talked about how it happened. We talked about the fact checkers, we talked about the AI, and we talked about the different things that are happening in the newspaper. But if you bring it back down to the local level, let's bring the misinformation back down to the local level. Because earlier this evening, and I was taken aback too, because like many of you, the sign that was brought in here is not one that I would carry. But that's where the thing comes in. The misinformation happened, and I'm surprised that nobody was really willing to step in, because a lot of times what happens in these situations is, since the crowd is all going with it, the narrative is spun, and then they write from the police narrative. They write from the police affidavit, and they never interview the suspect or anybody else to find out exactly, or any opposing witnesses. They get the narrative and they write from it. Case in point, this last meeting that just happened at the city commission meeting, there was a narrative that was written about what happened. Now, when they write from that narrative and just from the affidavit, do you think those reporters owe it to anybody to write beyond the affidavit, to not just rely on that affidavit, but to actually talk to people about what they felt and what their perspective was, the actual people involved? That's okay. And that's not happening here. That's what we're concerned about. I wasn't questioned at all. I wasn't asked about an opposing viewpoint at all. It was just written that I had caused a disruption and was removed and cited. But Sherman, do you have any comments on not just writing from an affidavit? That's my concern, because we see the police narrative carrying the day and seeing the crime system.
I would just say that sometimes when I've gone into college classrooms, one of the things that I will do is read the news release that Minneapolis police put out after George Floyd was killed. We had a shooting in Topeka, I think it was in October last year, where both the Topeka police and the KBI put out a news release that day that said this man was holding a knife and police shot him. We now know from a lawsuit where they were able to view the body camera, the guy did not have a knife, he was reaching for a soccer wrench on the ground. So I do think it's important, and as the gentleman before, I wish he had stuck around, said not to just parrot what government officials tell you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when that man mentioned that parroting the news, that my concern as a journalist, and someone who teaches the journalism, is there are way too many journalists out there who just parrot the government, or they parrot the transcript. And a really good journalist looks at that, and then they go out and they find experts in that field. Maybe I don't know what he was talking about, but I think he may have been talking about the CDC. I'm just guessing, you know, and you know, a very good journalist will go out and interview other people and talk to not just two sides, all the sides. But I can also tell you from a practical standpoint, as someone who worked in the industry, I've worked both before computers and after, there used to be a whole lot more time to do that. And now it seems like everything has to be instantaneous. And I know that factors in that. News organizations, for the most part, not totally, but for the most part, are businesses, and they're money-making businesses, and you have bosses who want you to get that on the web now, and that's a factor that every journalist has to push hard against. That I can't do bad journalism just because you want it up there fast.
I think we've all written the best story we could with the information we had available. Sometimes you have a document, you can't get a hold of somebody. make a decision, this is newsworthy enough for people to know about. And so, you know, I think you have to cite whatever your sources are so people know that it's limited in that effect. I've been working for several weeks now with an international investigative group to identify the leader of a white nationalist organization based in Kansas City. And we've been sitting on this story now, which has been ready to go for a week, and we'll probably do another week because we want to exhaust every possibility of contacting this individual. Another round of emails, another round of text messages and phone calls, and putting a certified letter in the mail tomorrow to make sure that we've done everything we could. And I think sometimes it's a calculus between, am I writing about a court case that was filed that's interesting and it is timely, or am I writing about the identity of a white nationalist group? Right? I mean, sometimes that factors into how much effort can I put into the story before I have to move on to the next one.
And also, I would just say that Sherman mentioned George Floyd, but you could go through any of these big cases and see where people have not talked to folks, not have gone and looked past the police report. Police report is, police are not always your best witness, and they're not always gonna be truthful. And so you could just go back and just start looking at some of these cases, especially when it's with black and brown people, let's be very real about this. And you're gonna see that they have not done the work that they need to do. And so again, that's why representation in the newsroom matters. Did I get everything I always wanted? No. But sometimes just saying, hey, we need to go and talk to that person. Hey, we need to go and do this. No, we're not gonna push that. No, I'm not publishing that because I usually had carte blanche to do. When bosses were gone, I was in charge. So then, you know, again, representation matters. So we're trying to teach this new group how to be better about that. And the reporting, sometimes it just takes time. If it's a good story, you need to take the time. Sometimes our best isn't good enough.
Our panelists, thanks so much for your time tonight and for answering so many people's questions. Put a round of applause to folks